Hello, and welcome to the Noonflower Studio channel. Today's video will be about the basic equipment that you will need in order to start making things with polymer clay. So starting off with the obvious, we have the polymer clay. So there's a lot of brands around nowadays that make great polymer clay. I am currently using three main brands. I'm using the Fimo, the Cernet, and the Scalpy brands. There's also Kato that I've tried previously that is really good, and I've heard really good things about Montmartre too, so plenty of choice out there. Each of the different brands has various lines and collections in their range, varying, as you can see here, from metallics to translucents, and not forgetting, of course, the plain clay, which is just your basic colors, your basic effects of a block of color clay. So different clays have different properties, so I always encourage and recommend that when you first buy your clay, you buy a few different brands if you can, and a few different effects and textures, as well as your planes. So if you're going out to buy and if you want to stay to the bare minimum, I would recommend getting a block of white, a block of red, and some other color, whether it has an effect like a metallic or translucent to play around. That would be really good. But if you have to have your basics, go black and white and the color. I will be going into a lot more detail about the different types of clays, the different brands to use and when in my next video, but for now, this is the basic. For the first most essential tool that you will need to work with polymer clay, we have rollers. Rollers are used to create an even slab of clay, so even in the sense that it will be the same height across. And there's one other tool that's coming after this that I will show you that you will need to do this, but rollers are an essential, absolute essential for clay making. Now for the next essential tool, which is cutters. You would have seen this coming for sure. So there's many cutters around, and they don't have to be necessarily specific polymer clay ones. This is my collection, part of my collection. So I have the professional ones that I am showing you right now. They're designed specifically for polymer clay. The edges are very sharp. There's metal ones and printed ones, 3D printed ones. But then there's also these guys. These are cake making supplies and tools that are really great. There's the leaf cutters, and these are fantastic because they have a plunger tool. So if your clay gets stuck in the cutter, you can just press the plunger and it will push it out. Then there's also a hidden gem, Play-Doh cutters. So my daughter's Play-Doh cutters come in extremely handy when I want a particular shape and I don't have my professionally printed ones. So there you go. What I highly recommend, however, is that if this is the first time you're about to hit the polymer clay world, that you buy or supply or find circle cutters, whether they're metal ones, printed ones, clay ones, or cake making ones, or cookie making ones. These circle shape cutters, they will be your best friends in the polymer clay crafting world forever. They are still my most favorite cutter. They're the ones that I use the absolute most throughout my crafting. Onwards and upwards, the next tool will be the blade. So there are many different brands of blades out there that range from really cheap, easy to find, to more expensive, perhaps a bit safer to use too. There's two different types of blades. There's the stiff blades and the bendy ones. The stiff blades I use to cut straight lines normally. Bendy ones I use to cut canes because I find that they're always a little bit sharper. But it's up to you. It's always up to you how you use your tools. Now, as I said, there is a second tool that you will need to create an even slab of even height, and this is the depth guide. There are many options out on the market nowadays, and here are the ones that I own basically. This is a 3mm one, which is my generic one, I suppose, the depth that you would normally use to make clay earrings. This is a second type that I own. And then if you wanted to really go a cheap option, if you're just still trying out, still not sure whether you want to do polymer clay, I would easily and very happily recommend these tongue depressors, I think they're called. I bought these in a cheap shop for a pack of, I think, 24, something like $2.50. So very, very cheap. And I'd use two on top of each other, perhaps glue them together so they don't run around. And they're fantastic to create an even depth of clay. Clay is very sticky, and if you simply put it on a piece of paper or a chopping board or whatever, you'll find that it will stick and it will be impossible to take off. And if you do manage to take it off, it will warp your shape and you'll have to start over anyway. So what we do is we use a tile. So the base of the video that you're watching is my actual tile that I use. It's a massive one that I found in a salvage yard, again for about $2. But I'm also showing you this little one here because little ones are excellent for when you're making a small amount of earrings and you want to turn them around to keep fixing them or adding little details. And then the great thing about that is that you can bake the clay directly on that tile without having to lift them off the tile and placing them in a baking tray as many people would normally do. So yes, a tile of any size is an essential tool for the new polymer clay maker. For cleanliness reasons, to keep our work tidy, I am recommending an isopropylene alcohol. This is the one that I use, which is Isocol brand rubbing alcohol. Rubbing alcohol is great because it's slightly less potent than normal isopropylene alcohol, and it has a beautiful smell, especially this brand. So why do we use this particular product? Rubbing alcohol is used to keep your work clean. When it comes to polymer clay, you will find that polymer clay loves picking up dust bits, anything that is lying around without you even knowing, it will be picked up. So it is used to clean your tile, for instance. After you finish with one color, you put some on a piece of cotton wool or paper towel and you clean up your surface to keep your work clean. It is also used when the clay is still raw. If something lands on your clay and you really do not want it to be there, like a speck of black clay on your shiny new piece of white clay slab. So you pop out your rubbing alcohol and a piece of cotton wool and you dab it a little bit and you just gently rub it off and it should come off really, really easily. Needle tools. Many would argue that needle tools are not an essential for a beginning artist. However, I would argue the opposite because as a beginner, you will need every help you can to get those holes drilled the right position. So with a needle tool, when the clay is still fresh, basically what you do is mark where you want the holes to go for then eventually you can put your jump rings through and put your earrings together. Somehow and for some reason, baked clay is much harder to get right when it comes to holes. So a little hole that is pre-baked into your clay will help you a lot as you begin making clay. Eventually you can do away with this method, but I would say needle tools are quite an essential tool. And the bonus use for needle tools is to create texture. I use needle tools all the time for my textured pieces. This will come in handy for a lot of different texture and effects, but also when you're pulling that extra bits of clay and you have all those shapes cut out very close to each other, instead of putting your nails in there and trying to lift off the tiny bits and risking putting nail marks or chipping any of the fresh clay, you could get your needle tool and it can lift the teeny little bits of clay without any effort at all. Next is the drill. There's two different types of drills in general. There's the hand drill, like the one I'm showing you here. They're very easy to use. You might think that it would be hard work to drill into clay, but it's actually really easy. These tools usually come with an interchangeable tip just in case the drill bit blunts, which is a rare occurrence, but sometimes it does if you drop it or if you chip it against something. And then there's the electric drill. This is my baby Dremel. I love this guy. He's called Dremel Stylo. He's the smallest of the Dremel tools, and it is excellent, especially if you are prone to wrist pain or strain or tennis elbow, any of those prolonged use injuries. And I'm very quickly now moving on to pliers. Pliers are used to open and close jump rings when you are putting earrings and necklaces or anything else together. They are an essential tool. Do not try to open jump rings with your fingers, because at the very least you will chip a finger. At the worst case, you might puncture your finger. I've done this before. I know what I'm talking about. So use these pliers. There's various tips that you can get in pliers. I have a flat nose one and then a pointed nose one. Rounded ones I would not recommend, obviously, because they're very slippery when they're grabbing the jump rings. And speaking of jump rings, we are at the stage where we talk about all the extra findings that you will need when you're putting together your clay products. So here I'm showing you a stud top with a ball and the jump rings in various colors. Then there's shepherd hooks in black. Here I'm showing you also some jump rings in black. I would have to say that my favorite color in findings at the moment is gold. I would stock up on gold and silver primarily, and then a few bits of black if you're into making black items. And how do you stick those backings onto your clay? Well, I use two products. I use gel super glue. It's important, the gel bit, because if you use normal super glue, that one sets very hard and very stiff. And because polymer clay is flexible, it will break off, it will pop off. If you use gel super glue, then that super glue is designed to move with the product. I also use E600, which is another type of super glue, which personally I find better than the other super glues, because it is very flexible and it doesn't dry as quickly. So it gives you time to work with your pieces, with your findings, placing them properly without having too much anxiety about it drying in the wrong spot. I also find that if it goes on your skin, it is much less damaging. And that's it, guys. Those are the tools that I personally would recommend for you to buy if you're starting on your polymer clay journey. It will give you a few options of things to try out without investing too much money too early. I hope you've enjoyed this video. If you do like it, please click subscribe and keep following me on my journey as I produce more videos for you to learn how to make polymer clay. Thanks and bye.